As you heard from our interim chairman in the last session, Dr. Anas, in this final session, what we aim to do is to develop some clear ideas, crystallize the ideas that we shared this morning and this afternoon on the issues of structure, on the issues of representation and transparency and balance to the alliance. So this is where we are at in this final session. We have 4 members on the panel. I'll start with Arlene. She's on her way. She's on her way. So I'll start with Hugh Lanning, who is on my immediate right. Hugh is a long-time trade unionist and campaigner for social justice with a deep commitment to international solidarity. He's an officer of Labour and Palestine and formerly served as chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. He was also Deputy Secretary General of the PSC Union and was a leading advocate for workers' rights, anti-racism, and global justice. The second panelist is Eva Mulla. Eva is Germany-born and New Zealand-based activist with a background in industrial engineering and management. She's an active member of the Palestine Solidarity Network, and she helps lead weekly protests on BDS campaigns, cultural events, and creative direct actions in solidarity with Palestine. On the far right is our dear friend and colleague, Chris Nineham. Chris.
Depends where you're standing. It depends where you're standing.
Chris is a socialist activist and writer, and has been involved in many of the demonstrations over the years on Palestine. Particularly, he was very active in the 2003 international protests against the Iraq War. And in recent years, he has been the chief steward of the demonstrations, and for which he was arrested recently alongside Ben Jamal. So this is the lineup, and our 4th panelist is Arlene Clemsah from Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Arlene is a historian and professor at University of Sao Paulo in the Department of Oriental Literature, specializing in contemporary Arab history and the history of Palestine. She is renowned both for her academic scholarship and resistance, with notable works including Palestine 1948 to 2008, 60 years of uprooting and dispossession. She's a prominent voice in Brazil on Middle East politics and a committed advocate for Palestinian rights. So these are our 4 distinguished panelists, and we start by discussing the issue of presenting a question on the issue of structure. I'm glad that Reverend Frank is with us today, because last year when they launched the Global Alliance Against Apartheid in Palestine, they had outlined a structure for its work. So I want to address my question to Hugh, first of all, on the type of structure, given his experience in the trade union movement, which was not only a national movement here, or his experience was not confined to the United Kingdom, but also broader afield in Europe and elsewhere. What type of structure do you think would be suitable for an alliance for Palestine, a global alliance for Palestine, Hugh? And its leadership, of course, we speak of structure and leadership.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start by
well, not ignoring the question, but going slightly off track a bit. Even though I was involved in the group that helped draw up the Constitution, I think there's an important stage before you get into the detail. The Constitution is just words, and actually what we need is a movement. And this is an important first step. And even though I always think I know everything, I've learnt stuff today. And that's one of the benefits of the Alliance. We'll be listening, learning from each other and finding out best practice. But you talked about trade union experience. I mean, one of the key things that I learnt from my trade union experience was you never build unless you organise. And this morning, Mustafa talked about his first point. His first point was meticulous organisation. And I remember when I was able to go to Palestine, Palestinians said to me, very nice, but what are you doing in your own country? And that's what I'd say to you. If we want a global alliance to be more than words and to be more than a constitution, it requires all of us to organise in your space. So that means to the executive committee, which will be the people who sort of emerge, who are going to lead things on, they have an obligation, I think, to say, because this isn't a representative of the global movement on Palestine. There are countries that aren't here. There are countries that are involved on Palestine that we need to make sure we contact, we get involved, and we make sure they're part of the global alliance going forward. In regions, and that's been referred to already, who in your area or in your region is not engaged? Who can you involve? Who can you do? And in your countries, what organisations are there who aren't here, who aren't present? So if you like, I think the first thing about building a structure is that we've got to make sure that the movement itself exists in reality and is representative of the whole movement on Palestine. Because if we want it to be powerful, it's not going to happen just by us writing rules or us just wishing it. It will only happen by us taking Mustafa's 5 points, but the first one, meticulous organisation, and committing ourselves to doing that organisation. So, and as said, talk about something to go home and do. If you want a global alliance, go back and build it in whatever is appropriate in your space, in your place. And it won't be done by somebody else. It will be done by others. And the Israelis, after Operation Cast Lead, they had, and Ben referred to it, the Rayut Institute. They have spent millions and millions in building their global network. And they decided to weaponize the Jewish communities. They decided to organize on communications. They decided to make sure they could attack their opponents. And that is what they've done. Now, we need to build a global alliance that can challenge them and what they're doing and have the strength to do it. We've got the numbers. We've got the right on our side. We've got the Palestinians. They're resisting. But actually, we're not as organised as well and as financed as well as them. And so how do we build the structure? I think humility. I think unity. Somebody referred earlier on, unity was difficult because of individuals at times having egos. Well, also organisations have egos. Organisations are very reluctant. They think they're right and don't like cooperating with other organisations. So if we're going to build a global alliance, it is actually making contact and working with. And so how do we build that into a structure? Then I suggested that there should be a fundamental rule in the Constitution that we operate by consensus. And that is that we're not having votes on things. We're trying to reach agreement on what we should do and how we should do things. And that means there shouldn't be significant opposition to what is being done. But reaching agreement means listening. And I know we're all here because we can talk, but actually to build an alliance actually requires listening to where other people are coming from and making sure we take their concerns on board. I don't think the structure needs to be that complicated. I think we need an overall body, the executive, whatever you call it, that is tasked or responsible for trying to make the alliance a reality. There needs to be a representative, and I think we call it the Global Council, in the thing that draws together a broad cross-section of people from within the solidarity movements so that we get all of the different views expressed. And then we need to have a gathering, however often it is, once or 2 years, so that we get a bigger grouping of people together. But having been involved in the trade union and labour movement for 50 years or whatever, I know that it's very easy for us to get lost in the bureaucracy. We haven't got the time to do that. What we need the Global Alliance to be is about action and about organising and making things happen. And therefore, what do I think of a structure? It's one that's got to be quite loose and flexible, but be committed to the work. So you mentioned about the leadership. What leadership would I like? I'd like a leadership that's got the time and the effort and the commitment to take forward the task of building the alliance. We're very good at picking people who are already very busy and very committed on lots of other organisations. We're not trying to detract from stuff that's already happened. We're trying to build on things that are taking place. So it's not so much the individuals, I think it's making sure that they're in a place to actually take forward the vision. I think as what would be really useful, and it was already said in a few areas, is for people to talk today, when we get to that point, about how you think you could build the organisation in your space, in your area, wherever that happens to be, and how you will go away organising from this. And it would be nice for individuals, if not to say it, at least mentally, to think of the one or two things that you're definitely going to do when you get back that's actually going to assist building the Global Alliance rather than just being here and having listened to it.
So because we are supposed to be a global entity, I presume that there must be representation from different geographic regions. Are we going to have equal representation from South America, the Caribbean? How are we going to determine the number of representatives we have from each region? I think it's a detail that we don't have to answer right now, but it's something I think we ought to think about as we try to develop this structure.
I mean, if
Hugh, 1 minute. Oh yeah, go ahead, Hugh. I'll come to you next.
Okay, sorry. I mean, we addressed that when the Constitution Working Group was looking at this. It did start off originally with saying there'd be 5 people from each of the main regions that have been identified. So that was from
the Caribbean wasn't mentioned.
Yes. Well, they were zones rather than areas, but it's sort of. Obviously need to look at those. It was suggested actually that we ought to have a minimum of 3 from one area and a maximum of 7 from another, rather than getting into a formula that's too tight or rigid. But you need to make sure that all of the regions are represented and that one doesn't dominate. But equally, you need to have some flexibility to make sure that there's a good mix of the right. And we also wanted to make sure there were Palestinian voices amongst that, from the diaspora and so on and things. Although it's not a representative of Palestinian voices, we couldn't really discuss things in isolation from the Palestinian view. So that, if you look at the draft constitution, that's the formulation that's come up, but clearly it can be varied. Yeah.
Okay, Eva?
Yeah, so in terms of structure, I think that the Constitution already makes really good suggestions. I would not reinvent the wheel. I think we don't have the luxury of spending time on trial and error. I would just look around what has already worked, and the South African case is a good example. If what you've done works well, then why not use such a structure and make amendments as we go? I think flexibility is important, but speed is also important. So rather than trying to get it perfect now and spend a lot of time on it, why don't we get moving and keep it flexible, and with the input of the growing membership, we can then amend it. In terms of leadership, I think, again, if we want to have it diverse and inclusive and all of that, if the leaders live those values, I think they'll bring it into the organization. And I think the most important trait of the leaders for now are networkers at heart. I mean, people who are just really good at networking and mass movement building. The leadership will be, I think, defined by the goals. If our goal is to make it the most powerful, biggest mass movement, then we need to have leaders who have these capacities and these traits. A few points on. I'm basically just a mouthpiece. I had the ears on the ground in New Zealand of what people would answer to that question. People would like to have good communication and transparency, but in terms of structure and leadership, we are really happy with what's already happening, what's been suggested with the Constitution, and we are ready to just go with that for now and then make amendments as we need it.
Chris, do you want to add anything to this?
Well, just a couple of comments, Daud. The first one, just to say, we did have, during the Iraq war years, we did have an international network of activists and organisations, which was very important. In fact, I would say that the crucial element of that network was that it was based around activity and action. And the fact that we called the Global Day of Action on February the 15th, 2003, was the thing that made that network relevant and meaningful to people, because they saw this was actually adding something. And it did add something, because not only did that Global Day strike a real blow against the, not a big enough one obviously, but nevertheless a real blow in the build-up to the Iraq war. It also strengthened the national demonstrations and the national protests. There's a kind of virtuous cycle you get into where people feel it's easier to build a demonstration where you are if you can say this is happening around the world. So that's point one. Point two, I very much agree with what Ava and Hugh were saying. I think the broadest possible alliance. This is a great start, but let's be honest, there are many countries, regions that aren't represented. But also, it's not just a geographical question. There are lots of elements of the movement that aren't represented here. And we have to make sure, as far as we possibly can, that we bring together all elements of the pro-Palestine movement in this global alliance. And that's not, as we know, necessarily something that is immediately obvious and easy. It takes conscious action to build unity. And I think people have said that in Britain we've done quite well. I don't want to be too sort of self-flattering, but we do have a very broad coalition that brings together different groups. And I think that's very important that we replicate that everywhere, and we see that as part of, at the heart of this global network. And I tell you what, the single most important element of that, I believe, I hope the others will agree with me, is that we do not set the bar too high for inclusion in the movement. You don't have to be consciously anti-imperialist to be part of the Palestine movement in the UK. You can be a humanitarian, that's fine. If you want to come on a demonstration and you're a humanitarian, you are welcome. If you haven't got a worked out critique of Zionism, it doesn't matter, because you can come on the demonstration and be part of building the movement. Maybe in the process, of course, of building the movement and the demonstrations, there are all sorts of discussions and people self-educate being on the demos, but we should set the lowest possible bar to entry. We should have the slogans that are simplest and reach out to millions. Because the situation is, and I'll end on this, people have said it varies to country, but certainly in lots of countries, the situation is that the movement is big, but the pro-Palestine sentiment is much, much bigger and is growing. And what we have to do is to attract those people into our network and into the movement. And that means saying, ceasefire now, end the genocide, stop starving Gaza. Those have to be the slogans, and everyone who agrees with them is not just welcome, but we actually need to systematically and methodically reach out to them to get them involved.
Thank you, Chris. I was just wondering, when you said don't set the bar too high, a movement like this with ambitions of its kind would require a leadership that is capable and truly representative. And so the question is, how do we go about selecting a leadership that is capable to lead this global alliance. Not only the leaders at the top per se, but also the steering committee that supports the higher leadership. How do we go about this? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think it's like all these things, it's an interaction between what this conference does and what people do nationally in their local organisations. We have to put out a call that is attractive, that looks relevant, that calls for action. And I think in that process, we will almost magnetically draw in the people in the various regions and countries who are, most committed to that way of operating, who are most committed to being outward looking and action orientated. Now, then, of course, we have to make sure there's a democratic process and an inclusive process. And I don't think we're in a position, I broadly support the Constitution, but I think we have to be, as Ava says, I think we have to be very flexible, and we have to understand that democracy is not just an end in itself and a goal in itself and a virtue in itself. It's the key to building an effective movement. So if we understand that, then we have to be committed to involving, finding ways to involve movements from around the world, to overcoming, looking at the gaps, as Hugh said, meticulous detail. Let's see where we're not organising, and let's make a special effort to reach out and contact those groups. But we also have to have a belief that, in a way, the democracy of it is something for all of us. Everyone here has to go back, if they're committed to the project, to their local areas and put the case to other groups for being involved. So I think it's about being relevant, it's about being as democratic as we possibly can, being dynamic, and crucially, adding something to the movement by being committed to action.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Ava, but I want to hear from Arlene if you have any thoughts on this.
Yes, well, thank you, Daud. Yes, well, I understand that this alliance is coming together at a moment in which there's a genocide going on, and this is the big reason. And therefore, I agree that the success of other broad movements has been a clear action. That would be possibly, in my view, I agree that it's necessary for success to have a clear idea that we're broad, and keep it as broad as possible, range of groups that are doing different kinds of works on the ground in their own societies, in their own countries. I'm an academic, but I'm also in several movements, supporting them and so on. And this won't change. The work that people are doing in their countries has to add up to the alliance, and not the contrary. It's not the alliance that will build work on the country, it's the work in the countries that will build up to the alliance. But what the alliance has to be clear about, in my view, from what I have understood from all that has been said today, is setting a very clear goal around stopping the genocide and stopping hunger. In Brazil, particularly, campaigns around this, stopping hunger, for example, really resonate. President Lula has this as his life struggle to combat hunger in the world, in Brazil, and etc. This is like his motto, no? And this comes together with genocide, combat hunger, combat genocide. This has to put everyone together, of course, in a democratic way, in a way that respects the big diversity, the big coalition that is represented, and that I have seen represented here. I think if we can learn anything from the BDS movement that started back in 2005, is that they were very careful about not putting goals that could divide people, that would divide the organizations. And I remember very well that first formulation of the BDS, how creative and intelligent it was, to not create divisions and to really be able to foment a work on the ground. And finally, while it also, under this general idea, it's also very important to provide resources. We need people in their countries publishing articles in the press. So maybe if this alliance can help distribute. Okay, so in the UK, a certain organization published a very good article in the press, and we share this as material that can be used by others, and even parts of the article copied by others to produce articles for their local press. create these resources. This alliance could also think strategically in terms of supporting the initiative for this goal, which is so urgent, of ending genocide.
Okay, Ava?
Your question was, how do we select the members of the committee, if I understand correctly? And the Constitution lays out that the Council elects the Executive Committee and the Council appoints the members of the Advisory Board. So it's a hen and the egg problem of, the Council has to come first in order to do all that. I think since it's the birth moment of this alliance, we only have a limited number of people who could be on the council. So I think step one is make as much noise as possible that this alliance exists, invite as many organizations and individuals as possible to become members of this, and then from that pool, that larger pool, select the council. The sort of longer term council. For now, we just have to go with the people who are already involved and who have the capacity to take on these important roles. And we just try to be as what's the word? Sorry, English is not my first language. As diverse as possible. Cover the regions in the world, different genders, different ages, different backgrounds, and create an as diverse council as possible. But I don't think we need to get caught up in the technicalities trying to make it perfect, because speed is of such utmost importance at the moment.
Okay. Chris, one of the things that we would like to have a vision of before we leave is the question of participation, grassroots participation in the emergence, in the formulation of the alliance and its growth. And as someone who has worked tirelessly in mobilizing people here in the UK for the various activities, what are your thoughts in this regard?
In a way, this is obviously a key question, but it's also like not rocket science. And I think what we have to do is we'll clearly have to have further events like this. If this is to be an effective operation, if this is to be an effective alliance, in a way that will be decided in the next few months, I think, in terms of our ability to generate more networks, to get more people involved, and, as I say, to organise effectively. But, if we grow, which we need to, we must. In fact, it's essential for the continuation of this project that we do broaden and grow. Then we will have to have a follow-up conference. There's no alternative to that. There may be ways in which we can sometimes do that on Zoom, but I suspect after 6 months or a year, if we're effective, and maybe sooner, to be honest, we'll have to call people together. And then what it's going to be is to be up to the various committees, the executive committee and the organising committee, to really try and make sure that the delegations are being chosen, in some sense, are being selected from the various different movements and the various different countries. So this doesn't just become a group of self-selecting activists. So there has to be not just a democracy in this organisation, but there has to be a commitment from everyone who's involved in it to broaden and democratise or make sure that they are genuinely representative from various movements back at home. We can't impose that. It's a very difficult thing to impose. We can encourage it, we can argue for it, and we can do our best to make it happen.
Okay. Hugh?
Some people have already mentioned it. I think one of the ways you can get grassroots commitment and involvement is through the actions that you're taking. And there's a huge diversity of things happening, creativity going on, new ideas coming. So we don't need to have a simple model, but we do need those people to think they're part of something bigger and wider, part of a broader alliance. And I think one of the things that's really important, and I always take my lessons from Mustafa, one of the other things that he talked about was communications. And if you look at the Israelis, every time anything happens, they have one script that everyone reads from and that they repeat time after time after time, whereas we have all sorts of diverse messages that are coming. And I remember back, being old, I remember back to the anti-apartheid movement. One of the things that was very successfully done by the ANC within South Africa and by these solidarity movements was having common messages that they used and repeated, under which they did. So the priority was free Nelson Mandela, or the priority was ending apartheid. So we need to try and ensure, I think, that we are formulating common messages that we use and communicate. That means that all of the grassroots feel they're part of that common movement, that we're jumping together. We're not just doing all our things separately in a diverse way. I don't think you need a formal institutional link. I think they just need to feel and to actually be of a part of a common movement. And Chris referred to, an International Day of Action. Mustafa earlier on talked about there being, a hunger strike being done. Well, in consultation with the Palestinians, I think then we need to be thinking about, is there something that we could be doing on a global basis that would involve all the grassroots organisations and make them feel that they're part of something wider and harness the sort of the support that is out there. And there was one thing I meant to say that our friend there over this morning said that struck with me was that we need to get outside of our comfort zones. And I think that means not just talking to people who we agree with. It means talking to people who we don't know, don't agree with, and so on. And one of the things I've been struck with over the last period is that when I meet friends and family and occasionally have a drink in a hostelry or something like that, whereas in the past people never talked or weren't interested in Palestine, they are. At the moment, they ask questions about it, and we've got to harness that knowledge and support into the grassroots. So I think it's by trying to have some common actions and also having some common messages is the way that we can get the grassroots involved and feeling that they're part of something bigger.
Okay. So there are certain mechanisms that we've identified that are necessary for the growth of the alliance. For example, a legal body or a body that concentrates on advocacy, on media, and so on. And then, of course, the youth. So where do the priorities lie when we look at these various, bodies that would constitute part of the alliance? Should there be a focus more on legal sort of litigation in the ICC or in Barbados as we have it now, or even here in the UK or Belgium? Or should the focus be on media work? I don't know. Chris, again, let's start with you. How would we, address these working groups, developing them and their focus?
Well, I don't think that, we can replace the work that is being done on a national basis. But I think what we can do, in particular, is to find the best examples of things that are already taking place. Like, for example, I was just talking to Ava about the initiatives they've taken around the ICC in New Zealand, where they have actually, you should say, but you have actually prosecuted some New Zealand politicians or tried to, for example. So we need to think of this network, I guess, as being generalizing the best experience in all the different realms that you discuss. But I clearly think we need kind of a full spectrum. We obviously do need to be concerned about the media and communications. We obviously do need to be concerned about the legal question. We obviously do need to be concerned about popularising propaganda and so on that is, the arguments as widely as we possibly can. I think all those aspects of the movement are vitally important. I think when it comes to communications, Hugh is absolutely right. We need to be thinking about really mass appeal now. We need to be thinking about messages and images that cut through on a really broad popular basis, because that's the situation we're in. And just to give you an example of that, in Britain, when we're building the demonstrations, we obviously use a huge amount of social media and so on and so forth. But we also say to people, listen, there are lots of people who aren't in touch with us on social media. There are lots of people who the pro-Palestine movement's memes or reels don't come up on their phones. There are lots of people who maybe don't rely that much on social media for what they do. We have to do leaflets. We have to do postering. We have to create in public space all sorts of messaging about the movement. We have to go beyond the immediacy of our networks. And I think that's something that we can't necessarily do ourselves here, but I think that's a message that we need to send out to the whole of the movement. Reach out. Be as accessible as we can, draw new people in. And in the end of the day, all of these things, and I agree with people who said this earlier, that all of these aspects of the work depend in the end of the day on our ability to mobilise. They help mobilisation, but if they don't lead to really increasing our level of mobilisation, then our impact will start to dwindle. And that seems to me to be the central strategic question that we've got to address.
It would seem to me that for the purposes of the Global Alliance on Palestine, that these working bodies are crucial, are indispensable, and that they should be formed as soon as possible in order to take forward the task that we've assigned ourselves. Eva?
Yeah, I think I see two main blocks for this alliance, two main goals. One is to change the narrative around Palestine, and that includes, that's advocacy and media work, and it helps if that happens on an international level, because the news that flickers on the TVs in New Zealand draws, someone mentioned it, is all Reuters and AP and AFP, it's all the same source. So it makes sense that changing the narrative is done by this new umbrella body. The other main block is, and I have quite a specific list of, I think what needs to happen is to facilitate all these different actors to network with each other. And I don't think it's actually very difficult to bring in grassroots organization. To the previous questions, I think we'll just flock to be under this umbrella. We are so hungry to be connected and network with other organizations. So I envisage a website where one part is publicly available, anyone can see the content. Another part of it is members only. And in this members only, we have what could look like a world map with hundreds of dots on it, each representing a grassroots organization or a lawyer who supports the cause, who can be on call for support, and all of that. So we have a huge database of everyone who supports the Palestinian cause in any way. We have then set up specific groups like student groups, Grannies Against Genocide, and so on. And the people who want to be part of it will automatically be drawn to it. We need a resource page going from something as simple as print-ready posters for rallies all the way to this 103-page document that the New Zealand lawyers have prepared to take the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and another loser, and two more business leaders, and refer them to the ICC for failing their obligations. And so we need a resource page. We need a good news, successes, breakthrough page where we spread the news of what has worked on the ground and why. One of our members went on an 18-day hunger strike, and we immediately got huge media attention, more than we got in the 6 months of marching every week. And it would have been great to have a how-to guide, how to deal with this and make the most of it. And now it would be great if we can share what we've learned with others, so we don't double up our work. it'd be great to have a forum where members can ask the community questions and get the swarm intelligence of all the lessons we've learned. And everyone can see who asked this question, and other people have the chance to answer. How do you grow your numbers? We've sort of reached a saturation point in New Zealand. It'd be great to hear how other countries keep growing their numbers, and so on and so on. So I think, to sum it up, we need the focus, I think, should really be on shaping the narrative around Gaza, pressuring the media, making the price they pay too high to keep spreading Israeli propaganda. And the other one is networking. Like, make it as easy for us grassroots organizations as possible to network with each other. And the rest will sort itself. Like, we're just going to go wild and connect with each other as much as we can.
Thank you, Eva. I appreciate the thought that things will fall together, on the basis of your activism. But given the nature, the goal that this organization or movement has set itself, there must be clearly defined processes for it to function. For example, the question of keeping in contact with each other, from various parts of the globe. What are the tools? What are the mechanisms we would use? How often we would use them? We can't just say, well, okay, we leave it up to fate to bring us together. So we must define a process and the methods that would keep this communication, going, as regularly as possible.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, I mean, the Constitution already makes good examples about there will be regional conferences, and then there will, local conferences, regional conferences, international conferences, as much face-to-face as possible. Of course, the emissions are terrible in this regard, but maybe once a year, once every 2 years, that's necessary. And then we don't need to, there are so many tools. I mean, you can just Google search what tools you can use, and a lot of them are safe. Signal, obviously, for communicating. Then there is collaborative writing, opinion polls, file storage. All the tools are out there. I think all we need to do is define what we need, and then it's a Google search to find the tool and choose the one that's the most secure. And a lot of the grassroots movement have now at least 22 months of experience with choosing the tools that work for them. So I don't think that's a very complicated thing to solve, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open the floor now for questions and comments. Here we go. Where do we start? I would start with Reverend Frank, because I was particularly interested in the structure that you had set up after Johannesburg last year, and how that can be useful for us here, whether at all it will be useful for us here. And even before Johannesburg last year, during your anti-apartheid struggle, you had a huge international operation, and probably you can share with us your experience in this regard.
Thank you very much. Let me just say, we walked through this, what you are doing now, we walked through it May last year. So just to give you an idea, that's why we need to coordinate and integrate. We convened a conference, we called it Global Anti-Apartheid Movement. So, and then we brought about 400 people from Latin America, North America, Europe, Asia. I remember because for Africa, they had no money to come, and their tickets were the most expensive. It's more expensive to go to an African country than go to Europe. So we're trying to bring 77 people from the African continent so that they are part of that conversation, and we got many of them. So you would say grassroots leadership, that was there. And I think you've done something here we wouldn't have done in the manner you have done, because you've picked up leaders from various countries. Then we had in South-North, we said we must have equal numbers of this global South and global North, which we managed to a certain extent. So I want to say a number of things. Firstly, we decided then we would not launch the global anti-apartheid movement. The observation we made is people are here per invitation, but they are not necessarily representing the movements in their countries. It's a very critical issue. And that person who's there must be the type of person who will go back and mobilize everyone, including those they didn't work with. Because at times you are prominent, but you don't work with others. So we said, go back, and then we had a declaration. They mandated the steering committee to produce a program of action. There was no time like you do here. There's no time. Program of action we produced, send it to the 400 people on their behalf. And then we've got thematic working groups on each one of the action points, which comes from the collection of all. Then the last thing I want to say is that, because I think it's critical before I come to the movement, we then said, as South Africa, let's give it a go and see whether we can have a chapter. So we called it South African Chapter on the Movement. So we didn't say we are the movement, but it's a chapter. So we then went to organize. Fortunately, I must say, facilitator, that we are very close to our liberation struggle, so we had not forgotten how we did it. But we made sure the trade union federations are represented, the religious churches are represented, the different religious entities, even go to the Muslim religious entity. There are two main groups there. We made sure they are all represented. We actually did quite an exercise. We also agreed that those who differ don't come and differ here. You know, there are people who don't agree to work together. We say, but here it's about Palestine. It's not about your business. So don't bring your politics here. This is about the freedom of people of Palestine. And so we agreed to do that. We also agreed with our Palestinian friends that, please, you also have your own challenges. So let's not bring that complication into the movement. We want to support Palestine, the Palestinians, and we should make sure we keep unity. So where we are now, we had sent a note to everybody to say they must now report about what they've done in the last, it's now 1 year. Yeah, in the last 1 year. So when we heard about this, that's all I want to say. When we heard about this, we said, well, that's something we have interest in. That's why I'm here. What I would have done, I would have said, towards a global movement, towards a global, rather than we are the global movement, because there are other people we need to bring into it. So what I would like to suggest, by the way, we need this movement, so the politics mustn't crack us. We have a program we can integrate with what comes from here, make sure that the ultimate product it includes everybody from all regions of the world, and plead with those who come from their countries that they shouldn't be themselves without others.
Yeah. Okay.
That it must include the others you don't even work with.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Daud, and thanks for all the panelists. They have a great contribution towards the forming the final shape of the movement or the global alliance. To start with, I think it is good to mention that we have in this room representatives of 63 organizations from 25 countries. This is a good number for a gathering. We started to bring people together just in 5 weeks' time. And we know for sure that we can work hard to bring hundreds of organizations to this global alliance. And it should be one of the main objectives of the interim executive committee maybe, is to allocate this task to them to open up the membership or to reach out to all those who are interested in the work for Palestine in the international level to be part of this alliance. Other point from what I heard in this session, I believe the successful solidarity work is the least scrutinized on administrative and structural matters and is the work that focuses on common grounds. We should not waste our time in the structures and all these constitutions, although it is important. But we need to focus on action. Action, coordination, inclusiveness are the magic words for the success of this global alliance, I believe. Also, some people during the day approached me as a member of the preparatory committee. They saying to me, we been invited to many conferences during the last 2, 3, 4 years. And we did not see any results. We did not see any practical thing. So what is the difference between this conference and this global alliance and others? Firstly, I said that fortunately, luckily, we have Reverend Frank with us today, and he been met by the chair of the committee, preparation committee, and discussed several things, including the merging, the cooperation, the coordination, all these nice things discussed by Mr. Frank. And also we have the brothers and the friends from the Palestinian conference, Palestinians Abroad Conference and the Global Alliance Anti-Occupation, and they are willing to come in and discuss the unity and the emergence between all of these big organizations. So when it comes to the criticism that these conferences are not doing much, I can say myself, and this is my hope, I cannot guarantee, but this is what we are working for. To have actions is the most important thing for this global alliance. Action is, as one of you said, the global alliance should be orchestrated or built on the action. And as an action point out of this discussion, I believe we should not leave this hall today without announcing or calling for an international action, International Day of Action, something to decide before we leave today. We have to have something practical to show and to prove to the people that we are not only different, but we are keen to start our work as a global alliance with actions, and I think this is very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the conference. And I'm chair of Jewish Network for Palestine in the UK, founded by UK members of JVP in America. And I want to, with humility and gratitude, raise the question of danger of setting a high bar. Because while I agree that concepts like imperialism and settler colonialism and Zionism may be very alienating for the mass of people that we want to attract, I honestly think that concepts like democracy, equal rights, and from the river to the sea are very simple and widespreadly accepted concepts, and we need to stress those in a very simple and direct way. I do worry that the two-state distraction institutionalizes apartheid in Israel, which, after all, was founded on racist violence on Palestinian land, thieving Palestinian land and lives, and along the way, thieving Jewish identity. And so I want to suggest that a mass appeal around a single secular state is the sole sustainable solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mustafa.
Thank you. I just glanced very quickly at the proposed draft constitution, which is just a draft. It needs to be examined and so on. But I would say that probably there are three main goals that have to direct whatever structure or organization would be. The main first thing is how to add to what exists an additional network or cooperation that makes the whole work more effective. I think that's the main goal. And so that Palestinians would be able to achieve their liberty and freedom. And second, I think it has to be flexible enough, because we are talking here about networking and about the ability of everybody to work together on specific things without feeling that they are constrained by a certain bureaucratic structure. So I think the key point here is how to concentrate on building a structure that is more of a network rather than an organization. I think that's what maybe that would help accommodate some of the comments that were made here. But I think it's very important and it's very much needed. As we have seen from just this one day, which is literally one day, we've learned so much through exchange of experiences. So the need is there. The question is how to meet the need in the most comprehensive way and in the most flexible way and the most representative way at the same time. So I think the key word here that will allow us to reach a good conclusion is simple. It's flexibility. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sophia MacLeod from Scottish PSC. Yeah, I think that's a good formulation. And as Frank, you were saying, about towards a global alliance, and comments made on the panel about we're talking about a movement that already exists, right? That's actually very, very diverse, very deep, coming from and very broad already. So I think that's really important, and I guess a caution on our side. One thing that I've noticed, the BDS movement has been going for 20 years, and it has garnered a lot of successes through work on the ground. And I think that, I don't know, it just feels like it's missing from the documentation and from our conversations. So if we're talking about the Palestine Solidarity movement, I think we need to encompass certainly the BDS movement, which is a significant part. And the point that you made earlier, Arlene, about the BDS call, that's really interesting, because actually when the BDS call came out, it's a principled call. I mean, first and foremost, it was principled. It was based on the 3 demands and calling for a boycott of Israel because lobbying had failed after decades, and based on the South African model. I think that is, it was not easy when the call came out. If we're talking about high level, low level, to make it as broad as possible, today, I think there'll be very few people who are in the movement who've been demonstrating who it would say, of course I support the BDS call. Of course, for those who aren't aware, that's our job in terms of engaging with them. But the call was not popular at the time. We had to fight for it. The 3 demands were not popular. The concept that it was a boycott and isolate the state of Israel and complicit institutions was not popular. So I think we need to consider this. This isn't about, I think it would be a mistake to go at a lowest level. And I think for those of us who've been involved in movements for a long time, the new people coming on board actually may be further ahead than where we think we are. So it's to consider that as well. Just the last thing, in terms of the inclusion of the BDS movement and the Palestinian partners within that, is we may be in danger of undermining that impactful movement that's already going on, which I think we need to consider. And just the very last point about representation, I think everyone's pretty much said it. But the point made about, I think again, Frank, you made it, we need to reach out to those people who we have not spoken to, who we may have excluded ourselves. I think there's an exercise now where we are in the country or in the region to build trust.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Lindsay.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to say, firstly, I think that the conference has been a big step forward in terms of what we've managed to do today, regardless of exactly what comes out of it and how much we feel it's a sort of, whether it's a flexible thing or whether it's a more solid thing. And I would say that because of all the national differences obviously in terms of cultures and politics and level of organisation and so on, I think it's bound to be, it has to be a kind of work in progress in terms of how people see it. And I don't think there's any alternative to that, given all the differences that people have to navigate and the resources that they have and so on. But I also think that when we look at structure and so on, we need to think about it as a political need as well. And it strikes me we're now at a point, and I guess one reason we've been able to have this conference, where actually the political need is much, much greater than it was even a year ago. I mean, certainly I, and I guess a lot of people here, had no idea this would go on for so long at this intensity, that we'd be talking about starvation of people deliberately brought about by the Israelis at this stage. I think for all of us, we would have thought it would be something sort of short of that. So that political need can overcome a lot of the differences that we face, as long as, I think two things, that we do have it as very, very open, and that we do have it with limited programme. I mean, again, I'm sympathetic to the whole idea of one state, but I think it would be a mistake to have a movement which is based around this, and I think that would exclude a lot of people. And secondly, I think we've got to get much deeper. I know in Britain we've got to get much deeper into the trade unions, into local communities, into doing all those things. So I think this is a tremendous start. We have to take it further, and I very much endorse the idea of a International Day of Action. One advantage we have, when we did that over Iraq, we all had to go to Florence and sit in a room. There was no social media, or hardly any social media. Now you can do a lot of those things online, and people are very aware of what's going on around the world. So I very much think that's good. I would also like to just say that in October the 5th, in Paris, various MPs in La France Insoumise and in various other organisations have called a big conference which is against war, but it's about Gaza. It's also against European rearmament and war. And I would have thought that's something, certainly we in Stop the War are going to support that. They'll have 3,000 or 4,000 people at it. But I think that's a movement we can link into as well. And I'm sure there's other things going on in different parts of the world which can also do the same. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
In continuation to what Eva and Zahar said, I think the best way for this coalition to spread around is by action on the ground, by initiating initiatives on the ground and then gather people around it. This takes into consideration that we go in two parallel lines. One is trying to make the local organization aside and go into the details. This will be specialized work. And the other thing is, as Chris said, we have to work on the ground. We have to call for initiatives and gather the others around it. This way, your alliance will be known, and this way you can spread the word. We have an example in our alliance against protection against the occupation of Palestine. We launched this alliance 6 months ago, and since then, we had the big initiative, March to Gaza initiative that made something, I think, in the media and on the ground. Saif was leading it from our behalf. And Thiago, on the other hand, was leading the ship Madeleine. So I think if you want to spread this, go in parallel. One
in organizing the structure, but don't forget to be on the ground. And of course, this needs a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, and a lot of resources.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kamil.
Thank you. I'm Kamil Hawash, an activist here in the UK. I listened to the discussion, and there's no doubt that those speaking on the platform were saying this is more of a network, more of people collecting good practice and spreading it, than going to what I read in the Constitution, which is the first object, unify and coordinate the efforts of solidarity movements around the world. That's very different to saying here is a network which shares good practice. There's no doubt that people will look, when in the UK, the big London March went, the first big one, the people around the world began to look at it and wanted to know how we got so many people out. That's the sort of thing that I think people look to. But to talk about unifying, I think we should be very careful about using words like that. Thank you.
Please,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I would like to reiterate, I already had it planned, but I would like to reiterate what Sophie said about BDS. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm just really wondering what the place of the BDS movement would be in the alliance, because it's a huge coalition of Palestinian organizations with already quite a significant international resonance, hugely important successes, a very clear message, a narrative, and I just feel it would be counterproductive and divisive to create a new structure which without their inclusion. So I would just really like to hear what the relationship would be, what people's ideas are about it, because I just think that we can't just eliminate them.
I'm sure the panelists will come back to you on this when they speak again. Yes. Please.
Hi, just going to say thank you so much for inviting us. We're very, very honoured to be here. I must say, I'm slightly worried that we've had the whole day of this conference and there's been little to no talk about the resistance. And I think it's important that if people are squeamish about the resistance, that should be part of our education process. We must remember, as Frank put the map up on the screen earlier, vast swathes of the world don't view the Palestinian resistance as a terrorist organisation. They did it to the Irish, they did it to my country, where you can easily bomb and destroy people because you've dehumanised them by calling them terrorists. So I'd be very conscious of any movement that goes forward that tries to have a kind of a decaffeinated liberation. It must include resistance fighters who, we must remember, are the only people physically fighting back against a genocide right now. And to exclude them in the narrative, I think, is to perpetuate this Western kind of abstraction that the white people are the good guys and that everyone else is the bad terrorists, whatever. So I think it's important to include resistance fighters in our re-education of people around the world in order for Palestine to be truly, truly free.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think the concept paper sent to all the invitees, participants in this conference, was very clear on the issue of having a new initiative to coordinate and cooperate the solidarity work and to lead to a unity shape of organization. That is the first point. The second is about the BDS. The conference, as I understand it, and the alliance are supporting BDS without any doubt. We should and we will coordinate with BDS, and the alliance should adopt calls for action in cooperation with BDS. But we cannot say that without having the BDS on board, that means all the efforts are meaningless. But we respect and appreciate all the 20 years of work for BDS. And this is what I spoke personally with Mahmoud Nawaja from BDS and explained the idea to them. And they were positive towards this, but they raised some concerns. And we tried our best to make it clear to them that we are not competitive, we are not replacing, we are not trying to undermine any effort. Every effort is appreciated, but we cannot have everyone on board. The last thing is about the constitution, because someone mentioned about the experience of South African. Thanks for Frank for explaining something. But we have the chair of the constitution committee is from South Africa also. Who proposed to you this constitution is Comrade Naeem from South Africa, and he took in consideration all the experience of the South Africans. Finally, some people mentioned the interim executive committee or the leadership after this conference. I believe the idea of the interim executive committee of the alliance with a clear should have a clear tasks and assignments to include reaching out to as many organizations as possible to join the alliance and make the door open to all individuals and institutions and organizations and the groups to be part of this coalition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, so we conclude now with a final word from the panelists. I'll start with Arlene, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you for your generosity at this moment, Kitty. Actually, thank you very much for all of this. The BDS movement is, of course, extremely important. It is a movement which created the BNC, which is a structure to coordinate. But I think that one of the lessons from the BDS is that it is a movement, and it managed to set a goal, a very clear goal that did not divide different movements. So there are tons of movements that are part of the BDS and tons of organizations that are part of the BDS. This is a structure that, in my opinion, was very valuable, that works. It also managed to change narrative. I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't talk about apartheid. It was the BDS in action that put apartheid on the table and educated about apartheid. No? I think we're at a different moment now. I think we're at a moment in which, everyone's talking about the failure of international law. I find this sentence very strange because I think international law has been what it's always been. It will only be universal when colonized people struggle and make it valid for the whole world, for the South, for the global South. It was never meant to be for the whole world. It was always a European project. International law is a product of Europe. So if it's failing, it's because we're noticing that it's a product of Europe, where people had never noticed. In fact, Palestine, and we have to help Palestine make international law be, taken on. Make it valid for Palestine. That's our goal. We have to do that.
Thank you.
Right? So, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I think the crucial thing to keep in our head, whether we're talking about the structure or what we do or so on, is Mustafa's point that it needs to add to what is already taking place, be that working groups, be that legal or other structures and so on, or actions. We're not about supplanting the BDS movement. We're not about building on things. What we're trying to do is fill the gaps and stop people operating in silos. Where they're not talking or learning from other people. So it is a network that we want to build, a global international network where people are in touch. And there's a framework which was mentioned earlier on where it's not prescriptive, and I sort of referred to it earlier on, but it was the national and regional structures. It's building networks. You can't do it from the top down. It needs to be done in areas, in regions, in countries where those organisations that do exist get together and talk about how can we build a global alliance, and that would involve the organisations that already exist. And I think it was Zahir who just said, but whether it's the executive committee to the working group list, I would say building the alliance is, my trade union experience, which I mentioned before, organisation happens dependent on how much time and effort you put into organisation. And if you don't put time and effort into it, it's not going to happen. Okay. And therefore, the alliance needs to have a clear focus, be it through a working group or the executive committee, about how it builds the alliance. Otherwise, it won't happen.
Thank you, Hugh. Eva?
I agree with the gentleman in the green shirt that the ones who are the resistance fighters are now called terrorists. So was Nelson Mandela, and they are the heroes of the future. I'm with you on that. BDS inclusion, I don't see I mean, I think it's obvious that they'll be included. I haven't heard anyone say they won't be. On the steering committee point, invite as many actors as possible that support the cause, including Instagram influencers who have a following of millions of people. So I would, and I second Dr. Barghouti's point on that it's a flexible network that connects autonomous organizations or autonomous actors that unite around a common goal, which is very simple: against genocide, against starvation, against injustice, and against ethnic cleansing, against Zionism, against racism, everything that's just common sense. I do not agree that we define what the solution is, because that's up to the Palestinians to decide. Our work, our only task is to remove the problem, and the solution is up to the Palestinians.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva. You.
I very much agree with that, and thanks for the discussion. I think all of us are agreed on the need to broaden and deepen this alliance and this organisation. And the reason, I mean, the movement has been very educative, and I think millions of people are beginning to understand, when they didn't before, that people do have the right of resistance. It's a right that's enshrined in UN law. It's a right that has been crucial to change in the past. But the reason why we need to keep the slogans simple and accessible to the maximum number of people is because the Palestinians need the biggest, most powerful, largest movement possible with the greatest social weight that we can deliver. That has to be the aim. The aim is liberation for the Palestinians, and the global movement needs to avoid putting up any barriers to any participation from people who believe that the genocide is wrong. And that is why we as a global movement need to keep those slogans simple, for all understanding that there will be debates and arguments within the movement. I think people are right to say this is a work in progress, but people are also right to say it hardly needs saying, there is a desperate urgency to the situation at the moment. And it has struck me for some time that for all the unprecedented strengths of the movement in Britain and Europe and around the world, internationally, there has been a gap. There has been something missing. And that has been the attempt to coordinate the mass action. The attempt to do something globally. It wouldn't be a panacea, but it would be a real step forward. And I believe, therefore, that whatever else we do in terms, and I agree with the two-track approach, we need to continue to build the organisation. But in order to do that, we need to show that we're relevant, and we need to show that we are doing something. And that thing for me is to say from London today that we are going to call an international day of action, which some people may not be able to participate in, but at least we get the idea out there. And I tell you what, this is something that only an international conference can do, and I believe we should do it today.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Please put your hands together for the panel.